Welcome to Breaking the Debt Cycle, Gaining Your Financial Freedom from Credit Cards.
Welcome back to Breaking the Debt Cycle, Gaining Your Financial Freedom from Credit Cards with attorney Michael Sheridan. Mike is a trusted bankruptcy attorney based in Minnesota. He helps individuals and families find relief from overwhelming debt through strategic, personalized legal solutions. I'm Lisa Mosby, and today we're talking about an important decision many married couples face when dealing with debt, whether we file together or one spouse files alone. Welcome to the show, Mike. Thanks for being with me.
Thanks for having me, Lisa. Happy to be here.
Yeah. Let's start with some basics. Can married couples file for bankruptcy together, or what would that process look like if they chose to go separate?
Sure. It's a great question. It's one I address quite frequently. So there are 5 areas that we look at when we are analyzing whether or not a bankruptcy would be a helpful solution to your debt problems. And those 5 areas are assets, debts, income, expenses, and transactions. And so that's where we start the analysis with those 5 areas. And the key one for married couples is going to be the debt. That's obviously where most people start with their bankruptcy analysis. And what we care about in terms of the debt is what debts are in whose name. So when you open a credit card, you fill out an application and you put your social security number down. That is the person who is liable on the debt, the person who enters their social security number. It is very common that only one of the 2 spouses puts the credit card in their social security number. What is also very common is that they make their spouse an authorized user. An authorized user of a card is not someone who's legally liable to pay the balance of that card. They're just someone who's authorized to use it. However, if there were 2 social security numbers on the credit card application or on the loan application, or the loan was in one spouse's name but the other spouse co-signed on it, then you have co-debtors, joint debts. Both spouses are equally liable for the debt. And here's the important point that a lot of people don't understand. Under the law, when there's more than one person on a debt, each person is jointly and severally liable for the entire balance. So the creditor doesn't have to split it up 50-50 or 60-40. They can go after both of you. And if one of you ends up paying the entire debt, well, your claim isn't to go after the creditor and say, I want half my money back. Your claim is against the other co-debtor to say, I had to pay 100% of the debt. You owe me 50%. So the creditor has now multiple options to go against these people. So that's the first thing we look at. How much debt is in each spouse's name? If all of the debt or virtually all of the debt is in one spouse's name, then the other spouse probably doesn't have to file. There are more factors that come into play, but that is the key one. So a married couple, you can file jointly or you can file individually. And really, the key factor between the two is, are you resolving more debt situations by having both spouses file, or are you perhaps affecting somebody's credit score who otherwise isn't really getting any benefit out of the bankruptcy? And so the decision a lot of married couples have to make is, hey, I've got the majority of the debt in spouse A's name, but spouse B only has, let's say $7,000 of debt. And hey, we're current on the payments on spouse B's debt. Does it make sense for us to just keep that up? And, how's that going to work? Well, you can do that if you really feel like, hey, we can manage that $7,000 of debt. But another benefit you have to look at, and one thing I urge people to strongly consider is you have a really unique opportunity here to maximize you and your family's ability to get ahead. So you're not filing bankruptcy because, I can I can't afford to pay $40,000, but I can afford to pay $7,000 in debt. The whole point of the bankruptcy is to get a fresh start, a clean, fresh start, turn the page and move forward. So if you're taking care of most of the problem, but you're still leaving the door open to a huge interest rate growing debt, that, yeah, you're able to pay it now, but what if hours get cut 6 months from now, or who knows what happens? You have to address that problem after your bankruptcy if only one of the two spouses files. If both of the spouses file, you don't have to worry about that. Well, okay, we've affected both of our credit scores. Well, that's true, but I don't think bankruptcy affects credit scores nearly as badly as you might believe. And this is another one of those myths that I commonly find is that people just believe their credit score is going to be destroyed for the rest of their life, that they're going to have some kind of scarlet letter B on their credit report and just they're going to have to hang their head in shame. We're somehow conditioned to believe that credit scores are like this badge of honor that it's our permanent record. And if you ever miss a payment, you're just shunned from society. And if you file bankruptcy, you're just done for your entire. And that's not how it works, obviously. So the FICO algorithm that calculates the credit score, it's a guarded secret, but it's pretty widely estimated that the two biggest factors that affect our credit score are our debt to income ratio and our timeliness of payments. It's widely hypothesized that those two factors alone account for about 80% of the weight of our credit score. So if you find yourself in a position where you're unable to keep up your payments because maybe your hours got cut or maybe your property taxes jumped up and now your mortgage is $300, $400, $800 more than it was last year. If you leave that $7,000 out there, you're going to have to continue to address it. But obviously, if you're able to wipe it out, you don't have to address it. Credit scores is what I was talking about. Credit scores, debt to income ratio, timeliness of payments account for about 80% of the credit score weight. And so usually by the time I meet with people, by the time they've decided, hey, it's probably worth my time and interest to talk to a bankruptcy lawyer, most people have already kind of started to go behind on their payments, or they feel like they're right at the edge of being able to continue payments. So once you start missing payments, your credit score starts to drop. By the time people get to me, it's usually somewhere between, the high fives and the high sixes, or maybe the low sevens. But the refrain is always the same. I used to have an excellent credit score. It was 815 and blah, blah, blah. And I, all that stuff. And yeah, that's great. But the credit score isn't a badge of honor. The credit score is a number that the banks generate to tell them how profitable we'll be when we use their credit cards. So if you have credit card debt and you're able to make your payments every month, hey, you've got a great credit score. They love you. But if you're unable to make your credit card payments, credit score goes down. Well, on the date your bankruptcy is filed, a court order goes into effect, again, called an automatic stay, and that stops any kind of a collection action against you, including reporting a debt due on your credit report. So the month you file bankruptcy, let's say you file Chapter 7 on February 15th, 2026, it is going to say Chapter 7 bankruptcy, February 2026, in each of the accounts in your account history section, what we call the trade lines. And the account history section is really the meat and potatoes of your credit report. It is where the credit score is pulling the data to generate the number. It's not looking at your prior employment or your previous addresses or the public records. It's looking at the account history data. So in the month your case is filed, it's going to say Chapter 7 bankruptcy in each of the accounts. And so the credit score is going to recognize the bankruptcy as a negative credit event in that month, and it's going to adjust your credit score accordingly. But the higher your credit score is on the date we file your case, the more the credit score is going to drop. The lower your credit score is on the date we file your case, the less your credit score is going to drop. It's not going down to 250 or 0 or whatever the bottom of the range is. But, let's say you're in the high fives. Your credit score might drop 20 to 50 points. If you're in the low sevens, your credit score might drop 100 to 140 points. But again, it's not going down to 0. But here's the part that people don't realize. Because of the way that automatic stay order works, and the fact that none of your creditors can report a balance due anymore, you now have a very unique opportunity to start rapidly rebuilding your credit. Now, if you just file bankruptcy and you don't do anything more, your credit score is just going to kind of stay in limbo. In order to rebuild your credit score, you have to have a debt obligation in your name that you're paying, right? Otherwise, how do the creditors know if you're valuable or not? Your score means nothing until you start paying them. So you make your monthly payments. You'll get credit card offers within weeks of filing. They're terribly predatory cards. Most of them are. High interest rates, low credit limits, but you can use it as a credit rebuilding tool. A tank of gas, a small grocery trip, an amount you know you can pay on time in full the following month. So charge your card, make your payment. This is after bankruptcy to rebuild your credit. And as you make your payments on time, your credit score is going to keep going up. And usually within about 12 months, it's probably going to be about better than what it was before we filed your case, if you're using credit rebuilding techniques. If you have a mortgage or a car loan in your name that you're keeping through the bankruptcy, even better. Your credit score is probably going to be better than what it is now within about 6 months. So your credit score is an extremely fluid number that tells credit card companies how much money they're going to make off of you. It is not a matter of pride. I am not impressed by your 850 credit score. It means nothing to me. It just means that you use debt in a way that the credit card companies think is valuable to them. So you're going to get that number back up. You're going to be able to get a car loan. Conventional rebuilding period after bankruptcy for conventional home mortgage is about 2 to 3 years. There are first-time homebuyer programs in Minnesota where a lot of our clients can get into a mortgage within about a year after the bankruptcy, after rebuilding their credit. It has to be through that program, though. Those are in Minnesota. I'm sure they're federally VA, first-time homebuyer mortgages, FHA mortgages. There's all kinds of programs in them. But by no means are you blacklisted from credit for 10 years or 7 years or whatever. Some stupid article by somebody who knows nothing posted online. So go talk to a lawyer. If you're considering bankruptcy, just go talk to a lawyer, because things you might read online, because of the way the interplay of laws are, might not be relevant to your particular situation. And what you need to know is you're getting accurate information from someone that you can use to make an informed choice about your circumstances. And, maybe in your circumstances, both spouses filing is the best thing, or maybe it isn't. But that is the role of a good attorney, is to tell you, hey, here is what you're probably going to be looking like if you do it this way. Here's probably what it will be looking like if you do it that way. Here are the pros and cons of each approach. The debt is the main thing to consider. The credit score is obviously a big consideration as well. But I commonly tell people, married couples, when they come into my office, I wouldn't put as much weight on that credit score, preserving that spouse's credit score, as you might right now, because you'll find you're able to rebuild that credit score a lot more rapidly than you might assume.
You mentioned that Minnesota law offers specific protections in some of these areas. Does Minnesota have some complications that married couples might run up against that's different than other states?
Not necessarily. So under Minnesota law, basically, we get the exemptions. We can choose either federal or state. And basically, with the small exception of Minnesota homestead exemption, basically, when there's a married couple, a joint case, then you basically just double the exemption. The difference on the homestead is it's a maximum of up to $480,000 of total equity, regardless of, which of the spouses are on the deed or if they jointly hold it or not. So there's no real complications there. Now, where there can be complications in other states is there's about 8 or 9 states in the country that are called community property states. And it's basically just the way states conceive of how married people own property. So in Minnesota, we are not a community property state. So in Minnesota, if you're married, just by virtue of being married, you don't automatically have an ownership interest in your spouse's assets. In Minnesota, if you're married, you might have an equitable interest in real estate, but you don't automatically have a legal interest in, half of your spouse's assets. And that's until, if possibly you get divorced, then the court says, okay, what's equitable, what's right? And that's kind of when they do that. In community property states, they say, hey, just by virtue of being married, you have a legal interest in your spouse's property. So we don't really come into that too much in Minnesota. Wisconsin is a community property state, and they deal with those issues more over there. But in Minnesota, we typically don't have to deal with that issue. And we're just focused on, okay, we can protect the assets, whether it's one of you or both of you. What do we need to do with this debt? How do we properly resolve it? And looking at the credit score and all things considered, does it make sense for both of you to file or just one of you to file? And, ultimately, if I advise a client, hey, I think you both should file, and they decide, you know what, I think just one of us is going to file, I say, hey, okay, that's your choice to make, and that's perfectly fine.
What if the advice you give they don't want to follow and one spouse is more stressed or confused, or the two of them cannot get on the same page and they disagree? How do you help them move through it? You've given us lots of examples of the details, the research that goes into the decision, but there's an emotional component to this as well. How do you walk through that with folks?
Yeah. So, I mean, mainly I just listen. People want to be heard, because usually by the time you've come into my office or you're meeting with a bankruptcy lawyer, things have gotten to the point where you're probably pretty stressed out. You're not, nobody comes into my office with a big smile on their face. Nobody says, hooray, today is the day I talked to the bankruptcy lawyer. I've been waiting so long. You're probably in a pretty stressed out place. And you just need somebody to listen. And at the point you come into a lawyer's office, you probably just need somebody to help, because you've just been so beaten down by the stress. And, with financial stuff, it's all encompassing, because everything costs money. So, hey, I can't send my kid on a field trip, or my kid wants to join the sport and we can't afford it, or, whatever. There's all kinds of problems. There's emotional aspect tied to all of this stuff. And I will help you navigate the financial aspects. And on the emotional aspect, the way I typically can help people is giving them realistic expectations. Because unfortunately, like I've mentioned before, there's so much misinformation out there and myths that have kind of developed over time of what bankruptcy is and what it does to you, that giving them perspective on what reality is helps them kind of shed away the things that maybe aren't as important as the things that really will help them move forward in a more stress-free and hopefully better way. But you touched on a topic that I also encounter, is spouses who are planning to divorce or who have recently divorced. And this question comes up in that context as well. Do we file a joint bankruptcy before we divorce? Or do we get divorced first and then file separate bankruptcies? So there's all kinds of emotion, stress, difficulties that come into play and that we have to navigate. And that's just part of this area. And, because it's people's lives. And, we understand that this is serious stuff. And for a lot of people, it's difficult to talk about. And that's why, I always offer at my free consultations, it's fully confidential. I'm not going to come onto a show like this and tell anyone's secrets on here, but I can tell you that these are common problems that people face. And, with the inflation and the increased cost of living and just the kind of volatility in the employment market, there's a lot of people out there dealing with a lot of stuff right now. And if a big part of what's bothering you is the financial difficulty that you're having, bankruptcy can be a way to eliminate that stress off your plate so that you and your spouse can focus on the things that really matter to you, yourselves, your family, your careers, your moving forward with your lives. And so it really varies case by case, but you just have to be able to meet people where they are and show them, hey, this is what we can do. This is, this, we can't do this, but we can do this. And maybe we have a couple options. Which one do you think is going to meet your goals the best? And if you're not sure, well, ask me some questions and I can help give you some guidance. And at the end of the day, hopefully you've gotten enough information that both of you can make an informed choice on what is the solution, whether it's bankruptcy or not, that is going to help meet your goals and resolve your problems.
Very well said. Folks, if you need to sit down one-to-one, Mike is here to listen and work through the specifics of your situation. So please reach out. And thank you for listening to Breaking the Debt Cycle, Gaining Your Financial Freedom from Credit Cards with attorney Michael Sheridan. If you or your spouse are struggling with debt and trying to decide how to move forward, Mike can help you. Make a smart, informed choice by sitting down and having that conversation today. And if you need more information, you can also reach out to atlasbankruptcy.com to schedule that consultation. And go ahead and like and subscribe to this episode or share it with somebody who may be going through these challenges. And we'll see you next week.
Thanks, Lisa.
Thanks for watching. Be sure to hit that like and subscribe button and leave us a review in the comments.